Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to all of our presenters tonight. Top-notch programs, everybody. Thank you for the effort and the effort involved in making the photographs and putting the shows together and then presenting them to us. So, round of applause for all the presenters. And thanks also to all of you, everybody here who's in the room tonight. Um, we're hovering around 80, 90 people, a few people coming in and going. And this is a fantastic turnout and obviously well-deserved for these wonderful shows that we're seeing tonight. For anyone who has not yet joined, it's very easy to support the Wisconsin chapter of the National Railway Historical Society. Just go to www.nrhswis.org and click on the join button. So our last presentation tonight, Gary Pancavage. Gary, are you ready to go?
Yes, sir, I am.
All righty. Well, then do your thing. Gary is joining us from out east. He's a retired Amtrak employee of many years. His first program well, I'll let you do it.
Okay. Let's get to where we need to be here. All right. Okay. All right. Let's go move this out of the way. And we'll go to slideshow. All right. We'll move this over one and back so it doesn't get ahead of me. Well, I guess I'm the only one that's newer to this group than Marshall Beecher. So Marshall, I've got one on you, I guess. But as Mike said, I am a lifelong resident of Eastern Pennsylvania, for those that don't know me. Was for 63 years. And when my wife retired 3 years ago, we moved to Delaware. Sold the big house, the kids are gone, and it was time to let someone else cut the grass and shovel the snow. But got to tell you, I've been here 3 years and haven't seen much snow. But I am a lifelong, or was a lifelong employee of Amtrak. I held several positions earlier in my career. The last half, I was with the Acela program. I retired as director of operations and special projects, and not shy about telling people that the reason what little hair I have left is gray is Acela. But we'll get into that as we get into the program here. So everyone knows in just a few short weeks, Amtrak will be celebrating its 50th anniversary. You've all seen the diagrams and the intentions of painting another handful of locomotives to represent the anniversary. That's underway as I understand, but what I'm going to start off with here is what was done 10 years ago. This was a very impromptu photo session organized in Ivy City that almost didn't happen because Amtrak was so power short at the time. Each and every one of these locomotives weren't even sure if they were going to make it, but somehow it was pulled together by the Vice President of Government Affairs. And I received a phone call on a Sunday morning at 11 o'clock saying that if I want to participate, I need to get down to Ivy City. So jumped on an Acela and here we go. Of note here, 66 and 156 are out of service for good due to grade crossing accidents and will probably be white lined and scrapped. I was told that the next paint job coming out of Beech Grove will be a phase one. I don't know what locomotive will get it, but you will see phase one again on some other P42. And of course, we all know that 66 was replaced by 130 with the phase two paint scheme. So moving along, a couple other views. This is the Ivy City Terminal. A night shot we did in Altoona. Vice President of Affairs Joe McHugh took 42 out to Gettysburg, of all places, on a PR tour. NS had just released the 6920, and Casey Thomason and I and a few other folks put our heads together and said, hey, while we're both in town, can we pull this off? Well, Casey disappeared for a couple of hours. We stayed with the 42. We were with the train, and here came Casey with 6920. The rest is history. Quite a guy Casey is. The ACS 64s have successfully replaced the AEM 7s now. Everything is pulled by one of these Siemens Vectron locomotives. But the first one that was delivered, okay, looked like this. Siemens took advantage or tried to take advantage of some publicity. So they put some graphics on the side of 602 to represent Boston to Washington and the Northeast Corridor. The reason I put this in here is I want to draw everybody's attention to these yellow wheels. You're not seeing things. What these are instrumented wheel sets. And when new equipment arrives, testing of unqualified locomotives or coaches at speeds over 90 requires approval from the FRA. The reason for that is these instrumented wheel sets have no brakes. The train has to have at least 85% braking quality. And the way they arrive at that is by some complicated mathematical formula that is another slideshow for another day. But the instrumented wheel sets measure forces applied to the wheel and rail at different speeds, different cant efficiencies, different curves, and the data is gathered in the locomotives. Off and running, heading north with the test locomotive well in place, and off we go to do some testing. This one was taken in Charlestown, Maryland last year when COVID hit. You folks Midwest might recognize this. This was Siemens' first venture coach, and I believe there are 9, maybe 10 of these now in an Amtrak paint scheme being tested out of Chicago to qualify for the service out there. But this was how they got it, the whole program started. In order to qualify at 125, which is what they needed to do with this coach, the FRA mandates that you go 10 miles over. So you need to successfully test at 135 to demonstrate that the equipment can hold speeds at 125. This was push-pull. You'll see another ACS 64 on the other end because they were running end-to-end. There are no Ys, turntables, or whatever to turn this stuff around. So they simply change ends and go back in the other direction. Here is another example of instrumented wheels. The cabling that runs along the cars, up the sides, into the cab, carefully placed and carefully secured so that it doesn't blow off at speeds. But not so much for inside the locomotive. Do you believe this mess? This is a fine example of French engineering. I can't begin to fathom how you would even put something like this together, take it apart, but yet here it is. This is the test train heading south over the Susquehanna River at Havre de Grace, Maryland, and heading back the other way at Newark, Delaware. We also painted a 642 in a veteran scheme a few years back when Joe Boardman was president. It still runs around today looking like this. Nice to have something different. There are 70 of these, or there were 70. 2 are permanently out of service now due to wrecks, but always nice to have something different. Heading north through Claymont, Delaware, south through the city of Wilmington. Passing an eastbound Acela at the S-curve in Torresdale. And kicking up some dust in a snowstorm at Bristol, Pennsylvania. When we get dry, heavy snow here in the east, people flock to the corridor for this reason. The show that's put on here is just unbelievable. Some pretty dramatic images can be captured. But you got to prepare yourself because when that white plume hits, you're going to get snow in places that you didn't know you had. And as I said, some pretty dramatic images can be captured as the sun sets and the snow flies. Right before the pandemic hit last year, they wrapped the 606 to celebrate the holidays. Again, always nice to have something different. This is not paint, it's a vinyl wrap, and we'll get into that a little bit more as the presentation progresses. But we chased this for all it was worth, just because it was different. This was an interesting picture here. People think it's easy to take these pictures. We knew the Coke engine was coming along, What we didn't figure on was the freight train next to it working Chrysler Yard, going back and forth a half a dozen times. So sweating bullets, wondering if we were going to get the shot. We finally did. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But this was very, very successful effort. Here's a night shot that I did in Wilmington right before they unwrapped it. It was wrapped for about 2.5 months. How do we wrap a train set? Well, when I was involved with Acela, okay, the Discovery Channel came to us and they wanted to wrap one for the Cake Boss. The Cake Boss was a popular show at the time. So it was done by an outside contractor who had the vinyl decorations painted up. The rolls are numbered. The stainless steel car body was wiped down with denatured alcohol. And they were very carefully applied in order and measured out. It was quite a process. I witnessed this on a Saturday and a Sunday. It took them 2 days to wrap the entire train. One half in one day and the other half they finished on a Sunday. And here are the guys doing what they do best. They're wrapping the windows here. And the great story about this is that the material is perforated by design, okay, so you could see from the inside out, but the number of passenger complaints due to poor visibility that we went through was unreal. I'd say you look real close and see if you see the small holes here, but people were not happy at the fact that they could not see where they were going. This is the one half that was finished on Saturday, and as I said, the following Sunday, they wrapped the other one. Finished product going over the Delaware River from Trenton, New Jersey into Morrisville, a few miles short of where George Washington crossed some 200 years ago. This is the beginning of the end, unfortunately. When the COVID pandemic hit last March, the bottom fell out of service. All 20 train sets were removed, okay? 10 of them went to permanent storage. 5 are still in storage, 5 came back out, but I don't believe that those 5 will ever see service again for a couple of reasons. And one of them is the new set that's testing, which we'll see in a couple minutes. So if you're of the mindset and you haven't done it, this may be a good time to start taking your last pictures of what they consider, or what they now call, the legacy Acela train sets. Here's one on its way to Bear, Delaware, permanent storage. Crossing Route 40 and being tucked away for all intents and purposes. This thing came along a few short weeks later, okay? And this is the reason that probably those ones that went into storage won't come out. This is actively testing. I was with it today down in Perryville, Maryland. Here we are on the way to Washington, D.C. Interesting story behind this was one of the coach cars had a damaged wheel in the process of moving it from Hornell into Philadelphia. And a great debate ensued about whether they could cut the wheel, replace the wheel, do this, that, the other thing. Well, it was finally resolved by Alstom showing up with the correct wheel profile. So they cut the coach car wheel, and the train was able to move from 60 miles an hour up to 90. They tested PTC on the Harrisburg line. This is Lemon Place, and the track here is the Strasburg Railroad, where the steam engine runs around the train and heads back into town. We just missed the meet by about 5 minutes. Tried to talk the Strasburg guys into hanging around, but they had a schedule to keep, so off they went. Zoo Tower in Philadelphia, still manned, but a mere shadow of its former self as it was under the Pennsylvania Railroad days and even Penn Central. Here they're headed down the New York subway out the Harrisburg line for more PTC testing. Took this picture this morning at Perryville. One thing I'll point out about this train set, unlike the predecessor or the legacy sets, this set will operate with one pantograph only. There's a bus line that runs through the train, okay, that mates the power cars up. So you won't see this with 2 pantographs up on the wire. crossing the Susquehanna River at Havre de Grace with some pleasure boaters, and heading back home at Newark, Delaware. Strange things you see under the wires. Wabash unit on the Delaware secondary. This was part of the Pennsylvania Railroad under the catenary back in the day, but it belongs to Conrail Shared Assets now. It's a freight track into Camden, New Jersey. Of course, the Wabash is one of NS's 20 heritage units, and here it's coming out on 39G heading west. Took this morning at Perryville while I was down with the Acela. Export coal is running like water through the port of Baltimore. With reduced passenger service on the corridor, there were 3 empty hopper trains that followed each other this morning, daylight on the corridor. That's almost unheard of. Most of the freight that runs on the NEC runs at night. But as I said, because of the reduced capacity, Amtrak is allowing the freights to run, as they show up. Sadly, you won't see these anymore because of PTC. Both Eric and Bennett Levin have told me that they do not intend to spend, the large amount of money required to equip these E8s with the PTC equipment because they don't run every day and they just don't see fit to do it. So, not sure if we'll ever see these run again. I hope I'm wrong, but time will tell. This was a photo opportunity that Eric Levin generously allowed to happen. The 8102 was in Camden on the day freight, and we knew it was coming out. So I called him and I said, "Hey, Eric, not for nothing." He was working in his shop at Fairhill at the time. I said, "Wouldn't it be nice if you could roll the E8s out for a photo op?" And sure enough, he did. There was a handful of us that were able to get this photograph. So kind of neat to see the new Pennsylvania versus the old. And the Levins were also known for a fleet of equipment that they lease quietly. This calf and cow set's ex-Union Pacific, and it was in Philadelphia at Ray Street Engine House for National Train Day, back when Amtrak held that event. It's on lease now to New Jersey Transit's River Line across the river in Pennsauken. They use it for maintenance trains and ballast. And the NSF units, when they owned them, were no strangers to the catenary either. This is Charlestown, Maryland, on a super elevated curve. And again in Bristol, Pennsylvania. The clock tower back there is Grundy Mills. Sadly, 2 things you won't see anymore. Over and under here in Morrisville, the AEM7s are long since gone. The Jeep 38s wear Conrail paint, but they're numbered and lettered for Norfolk Southern. That train is the Staley local that takes corn syrup from Morrisville Yard to Staley along the Delaware River. And wouldn't it be nice if all Amtrak trains looked like this? This was a leaf peeper special, autumn fall foliage train, 18 cars that made a circle tour down the corridor, up the Port Road, east across the Harrisburg line back into Philadelphia, with the 145 and the 822. So that concludes the Amtrak portion, and we're going to move a little further north now into anthracite coal country. Reading Blue Mountain in Northern, now known as the Reading and Northern, is a very successful railroad that started from 13 miles of a tourist line. This is the engine service facility in Port Clinton. The theme is, of course, the old Reading Railroad colors, the last paint scheme on the Reading, plus a few variations thereof. But things are changing on the Reading and Northern. The tired, worn-out SD50s, these 2, I believe, were sold, and they acquired 4 from Norfolk, or CSX rather, when they had a fire sale. And Mr. Muller and company decided it was time to change the image for reasons that we're not quite sure of, but this is what one of them looks like. The 5018, okay, I'm told is going to be the only one of the 4 that will wear this paint scheme. Rumor has it that the colors were Andy's from his high school. It kind of resembles the New York Central pacemaker boxcar for those of you that had Lionel train sets back in the 60s. That's the way I remember it anyway, but it's a different looking scheme for sure. And here's the polar opposite. We were told that the other three will get this scheme. It's the reverse of what we just saw. The idea being here that one of these units will be mated with the two NSF units that they acquired to pull the OCS, to eliminate Y moves and things that delay the train. The ultimate goal that Andy wants to have is a third F unit. He wants an ABA set, and he has a few that are tucked away at the engine house at Port Clinton, but they need a lot of work, and these are going to fill in the meantime when and if they can. Engine terminal at Port Clinton on a snowy day. 5018 does add a splash of color. And it looks good on the road too. Here they are on the flagship freight, the North Reading Fast Freight. Northbound on the old Reading Railroad through Leesport, Pennsylvania. The barn at Molino is a favorite spot for photographers. Tamaqua is an old coal town, was and still is. Anthracite coal still comes through there, and there's a big yard just the other end of the train. East Mahanoy Junction, the railroad splits. The train will make a left and go a short distance up to the old Catawissa branch till they get to Hawks Junction, where they'll head directly east on what was formerly the Central Railroad in New Jersey. Here we are at Hawks. And the scenery really gets nice when you get into Lehigh Gorge State Park at Glen Anoka. We're in the heart of the Poconos here through the gorge. I think the last shot I got of this was right before the light faded was at Penobscot. This is former Central Railroad in New Jersey trackage. And after the day's work is done, the engineers were kind enough to pose it for us for a night shot at Port Clinton before they put it away. 5019 and another warmer day in Jim Thorpe. This unit's not in service yet because all the wheels need to be trued. And we all know that Reading and Northern acquired half of the F units when Norfolk Southern put them up for sale. Andy himself admitted that he put the bid in and they never expected to get the locomotives, but boy, was he surprised when they did. And here he is in the flesh, the man, the myth, the legend, Andrew J. Muller. Down-to-earth guy, what you see is what you get. As many years as I've known him, and many times as I've seen him, I've never seen him in a suit, jacket, shirt, or tie. He rides the OCS like this. His bicycle goes on, the wife's bicycle goes on, 3 dogs go on, and it's not uncommon to hear the dispatcher say, we want to stop the train at such and such a location to let the dogs off. No kidding. Some more coal heritage from anthracite country. This is the drumhead on the tail car of his train. And here's a building that he built in North Reading. The outer station, this whole parking lot area was developed, and this is where their passenger service and excursions originate. Along the wall and on former CNJ trackage in the fall at Jim Thorpe, the Lehigh River on the left. This is Nesquehoning Junction. The freight on the left is the flagship fast freight out of Reading, and the passenger train is waiting for them to clear before heading back to Reading. OCS on another day heading east, and crossing the Lehigh River, about to head into the gorge. Reading and Northern can be colorful. This is the north end of Jim Thorpe Yard. Everybody's off and in town having dinner. We snuck into the north end of the yard to grab a few pictures before the crew came back. This is the new bridge at Nesquehoning Junction. The railroad put $4 million into this. The state of Pennsylvania paid $10 million. But this bridge now allows the Reading and Northern to connect their railroad without having to make time-consuming Y moves into Jim Thorpe. Prior to this bridge being built, they had to take the train into Jim Thorpe and run around it. Now it's just one shot right around the loop and off they go. 5018, you see there is bringing up the rear, and hopefully they're going to put the 5019 or one of the other ones that match the F units in service, but that is yet to be seen. And they're big on celebrating holidays. They are in the Reading and Northern. It starts in October with Halloween, goes through Thanksgiving, Christmas, right into Easter, but they go all out for Christmas, and really, really a nice display. Not to be forgotten about, they've acquired a handful of GP38s, and we hope that this Reading Railroad paint scheme is applied to all of them, and not some different color variation thereof. They've got a tremendous heritage here because they operate on lines over the old Reading Railroad, and people that have lived and grown up with this stuff recognize it immediately. Other things that they have, the RDCs are a large attraction. They run on dinner trains primarily from North Reading to Tamaqua. They're also used on fall foliage excursions. Here we are again at East Mahanoy Junction, coming out of Nesquehoning and putting up a little bit of smoke as we get started at North Reading. Not to be outdone by the RDCs, they still run the 425. This is a big drawing card on the Reading and Northern. It's run on most holidays. Occasionally it'll get towed over to Jim Thorpe and they'll run it in the gorge in the summertime. But they're very, very close to having 2102, the Reading 484 being done. The goal for the Reading and Northern this year, the big project, is to get 2102 back together. And Andy swears up and down that when it's good to run and it's painted, it's going to be put on the North Reading Fast Freight. And what a free-for-all that's going to be. It's going to be the East version of what the West went through when the 4014 went out, the big boy. Good luck finding a spot in the photo line. Night shot at Jim Thorpe. And this is an overall view of the complex at Port Clinton. This is where the corporate headquarters is. The dispatcher is housed in this building here, locomotive shop off to the right, and the OCS gets parked under the train shed. And the red caboose at the end tells us it's time to say goodbye to the Reading and Northern. And we're going to move on to something that's a little closer to home for me. Delmarva Central is a part of a parent company called Carload Express. They're based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And in addition to DCR, they own southwestern Pennsylvania and Allegheny Valley. DCR is their biggest property. It's 161 miles on the Delmarva Peninsula of secondary trackage that Norfolk Southern just couldn't get enthused about supporting or didn't want much to do with. So in 2017, January, it was leased out in an agreement to Delmarva Central, and they have gone out of their way to grow the business here. It's incredible what they've done in a short amount of time. But the way operations work here is what you see. NS brings the train in of loads, and DCR will bring the empties up. And when they get to Clayton, they'll swap trains. The loads head south, the empties head back north for travel and journey up the NS. Norfolk Southern power is not uncommon in the DCR trains because they use it for grain and stone extras. I believe the agreement that's written says that DCR has 36 hours to return the NS power back to them, and they don't waste any time doing it. When the stone or the grain comes in, they turn it right around next day and send it back. They also operate a handful of locals with some ex-Union Pacific MP15s. Push-pull style here and back-to-back here. The inbound trains tend to be very heavy. It's not uncommon to have 150 loads come in. These guys are really laboring here. The NS power is not online. The SD40s are doing all the work with the daily inbound. This is the highest point on the railroad. I think the grade here is 0.45%. The crews laugh about it, but this is the ruling grade on Delmarva. Here's another inbound going through the town of Cheswold. The NS power tucked behind for empty stone. And because we're so close to Norfolk Southern and like them so much, sometime we run long hood forward. GP 38's on the job this day. Base of operations is in Harrington. This is a former Norfolk Southern office. The day freight's on the left, and the 2 Jeep 38s will go out at night on the Indian River Secondary. The pool of reflection at Clayton. As long as I've been here, there's always seems to be water in this spot, and it's just the gift that keeps on giving. I don't think I've ever seen it dry. I don't have to go very far to see a train. This is taken from the inside of my community. Shorter southbound on a Saturday afternoon. And like most other railroads, there are mishaps that occur from time to time. Here, there were 3 loaded stone cars that picked a switch and rolled the rail over, so an outside crane had to be called in to put them back up. Delmarva is big on agriculture down here. This is the day freight passing the local John Deere dealer. And I finally relented after years and years and years and got a drone. It's kind of flat down here if you haven't seen or haven't guessed. And the drone just gives another dimension to it. This is considered a lot of snow in Delaware. You folks in the Midwest don't laugh. I mean, this is like DEFCON 4 down here. And this is like world ending. Schools close, people come off the highways, the governor declares a state of emergency. I've never seen anything like it. Yet the roads are bare. Here's the day freight south of Harrington. Stone is big here. There's a lot of stone traffic that comes in because the Delmarva Peninsula is basically sand and clay. Stone is imported from Pennsylvania, and 3 or 4 trains a week run with the loads in, and the empties go back next day. Here's empties with NS power being returned. Another set of empties at sunset. And here's where they end up. This is the quarry where they'll break the train into 4 pieces. And then this locomotive goes to work. It's radio controlled at pushing the cars through the unloader. The NS power will be put on a side track for pickup by the HA3 local, and they'll return it next day to NS. Oops, that one jumped. Another load of empties going back. Grain is also big here. Believe it or not, that they import grain from the Midwest as well as grow it here. But this is an inbound grain load passing Blackbird Green Spring. Southbound at Greenwood and passing the elevator at Allen's Mills. The grain goes to poultry here. The poultry industry here is $4 billion annually, and there's chicken farms everywhere down here. So we got to feed the chickens. And last but not least, we also see coal trains, but they're far and few between. The only power plant on the peninsula is down at Indian River, and it runs on demand only. But just recently, over the last 3, maybe 4 weeks, we had 5 coal trains come in off NS. As I said, I don't have to go very far to see a train. The 60-second drive from my house to the front gate is just brutal. The traffic is terrible, as you can see. And as the sun starts to set and night falls, that concludes my 15 minutes of fame. So I want to thank everyone for inviting me to present. Hope you all enjoyed it. If you want to see more of the East, you can find me on Flickr. I'm not a social media guy, but I'll be glad to let you join, and you can follow along with us here back east. Thanks again, folks. Have a good night.
Well, thank you, Gary. Wonderful, wonderful presentation from you. Anybody have anything to ask or comments for Gary?
Gary, would you happen to know if that dome car on the Reading and Northern was XSP or Milwaukee Road?
The dome car? I think it was Milwaukee Road.
Yeah, I couldn't see a good view of it. Looked like it could have possibly been one of the SP.
Definitely Milwaukee.
I'll confirm it's ex-Milwaukee.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Gary, I got two questions for you. You mentioned that passenger service on the corridor is down right now because of COVID. Are they running like 50% capacity? I would assume that, it's kind of like Metro, that things are, balancing out. But what long term do you think traffic is going to come back as more people are working from home?
Well, they are optimistic, they being Amtrak. Now, again, I'm retired and I don't have a first person view of what's actually going on in there, but they are adding extra service maybe next week. I don't know how many extra trains they're going to put on, but they do see some people starting to come back. Now that people are being vaccinated, the fear is dying down a little bit. They're hopefully wishing that they can fill some seats. But to answer your question, I do believe they're still at 50% capacity.
Okay. Then second question, you mentioned something about you share your photos somewhere. I
Flickr.
got Union Pacific going by here, and I heard a horn, and I didn't hear what you had to say. So you could repeat that for me.
I'm on Flickr.
Okay.
You familiar with Flickr?
Oh, very familiar with Flickr. I'm on it as well. What's your screen name?
You could, yeah, it's CR2580. You can find me there.
All right, thank you.
This is Harry Garforth. I just wanted to mention that Railfan and Railroad Magazine has just issued their latest edition, and it has a one-on-one article with Stephen Gartner, the president of Amtrak, and he does talk about Amtrak's plans for the future service, if anybody's interested.
Thanks for that, Harry. Gary, another 15 minutes of fame of yours along those same lines. Why don't you plug that?
I believe you're referring to the Acela article in R&R.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell us about that.
Well, I was asked to tell people, Steve Barry got a hold of me and just asked me to give an insider's view of what it took to put the service out every day. And hopefully I was able to capture that. I always said that management never fully appreciated what we went through, we being the mechanical department, to put that equipment out the door every day. They had no clue. They just figured it showed up at the bumper post every day like magic. And the things that we had to do behind the scenes sometimes were just unbelievable. But the article starts from the beginning and explains how the service was set up, what the intent was. And it goes through the entire 20 years. I started, like I said, to try to put everything together as concisely as I could. And I talk about what mechanical issues we face every day, what bad weather did to the Acela train sets, and how we overcame, especially the dry snow. It was brutal to the power cars. And then it kind of segues into the future with the new Acelas now starting to test, and the old legacy sleds slowly being phased out. So again, if you have an interest, now might be a good time to start taking your last photographs of what you're gonna what you see out there now. So,
and that's in the May edition of Railfan and Railroad.
Yes, it is.
Perfect. Anything else for Gary?
I thank you for mentioning that, Mike. I was reading that article just before the program started tonight, and I wanted to congratulate Gary on that article as well, because it brought back many memories of us working together and trying to get the service going.
Yeah, you know what it was like, Harry.
Awesome. I'll mention here that once we stop the formal portion of the meeting, we're going to keep the room open for informal chit chat as long as you guys desire. Once again, if you haven't yet joined, I should mention this. On our website, the Wisconsin chapter website, we've just posted, in fact, let me share my screen. We've just posted the May edition of Sparks and Cinders on our website, which talks a little bit about our upcoming joint meeting with the Northwestern Illinois chapter with John Jebko. But another important thing that we have toward the here is a story on Watco purchasing numerous CN branch lines. And especially important is a map that we commissioned to give you some sense of what all's involved in this divestiture. And that's on the back cover. And you can download this right now from our website, www.nrhswis.org, and just go under the newsletters tab. And of course, while you're there, click the join tab and become a member. And I noticed here that Tara sent me a note. Tara, our treasurer, sent me a note during the meeting that we do have a new member that checked in today, and Sayer Koss. Sayer, welcome to the Wisconsin chapter of the NRHS. And a couple other folks have joined recently as well. Andrew Hale from Shoreview, Minnesota, Joel Kirchner from Elgin, Illinois, and Kevin Madsen from Superior have all joined. And now Sayer Koss from Middle River, Maryland, have all joined the Wisconsin chapter NRHS. We would love to welcome you as well. So please check that out. And with that, anybody else have anything for the group before we turn off the recording? All right.